Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today we are talking with Jason Pickard. Jason is a man who takes risks in life. He is not afraid to stand up for what he believes in, even if it means going against the grain. And he is willing to risk the dangers of breaking away from the crowd of normalcy in order to be himself truly and live life to the fullest. Jason is a former Wall Street trader who left his job to teach matters of the heart and soul, and he believes that everyone has the potential to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. He is passionate about helping others achieve their goals. Jason is a risk taker, but a calculated one. He knows that there's always a chance of failure, but he believes that the potential rewards are worth the risk. He's a true inspiration to those who know him, and he's a role model for anyone who wants to live a life of adventure and excitement. And Jason, we're glad to be talking with you today.
Oh, that's such a great intro. Thank you so much.
So yeah, as I was telling you before I hit record, full disclosure, this is the first. I asked Google to help, and it did a great job of adding in all the pirate lingo too. And it added one more little thing. It added a poem about you. So
Wow.
would you like to hear this poem that Google helped me, or that Google AI wrote for you?
I'd love to.
Okay. So this is a poem about Jason Pickard. Jason Pickard, a man of risk, whose life is full of twists and turns. He's not afraid to take a chance, even if it means leaving his old life behind. He's a true inspiration to those who dare to dream big. He shows us that anything is possible if we're willing to take risks. So go out there and live your life to the fullest. Take risks, make mistakes, and never give up on your dreams. Just like Jason Pickard, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. So go out there and make your dreams a reality.
Thank you, Google.
Yeah. So you have a poem now.
I love it.
I feel like we should do that for every guest from now on.
I think so.
Like, that's amazing.
See if I can get it to write a poem. So yes, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you both.
And we'd love for you to start off by telling us a tale. Take us on your pirate journey, which led you to where you are today.
Of course. Thank you so much. So, my history is pretty unique, like all of ours, I'm sure. I started off really wanting to go explore Wall Street to the fullest. I was a Wall Street trader, and that's kind of what I had my mind set on since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And I fulfilled that mission. I left college and I got a job on Wall Street, and I found very early success. I was very successful by all financial and kind of academic standards by the age of 25 or even younger. I was making lots of money. I was on my way to becoming the youngest partner ever at this very esteemed hedge fund. I was ranked one of the top 30 traders under 30 years old in the world. But despite all of that financial success, I was 330 pounds. I was obese. I was sick. I was depressed. And I was on my way to a slow and painful death. And I had to ask myself some really big questions, like, why am I doing this? What's this all about? What am I really here for? Is this all there is? Because I had this financial success, but I felt like crap. I felt poor, and I felt broken. And so I set on this journey at that point around when I was 26, 27, around 2006 or 2007. And I lost 170 pounds, about half my body weight, over a 2-year period of exercising like a madman, pretty much, really with the same kind of intensity that I had approached Wall Street up until that point. And I lost all the weight, but interestingly, I did not feel that much different. I felt physically better. I was more socially acceptable. People looked at me in a different way, but I still didn't really look at myself in a different way. I didn't feel that much different. So now I realized, wow, I have this financial wealth, I have this financial success, I have this fit body, but there must be something more. There must be something that I'm still missing. And then I set out on this quest that I've been on for the last almost 15 or so years, really, which was this inner journey and recognizing that what I was looking for was something that had to come from inside myself. And that's really been the path that I've been on since then, is figuring out how to marry all of these things that had been really kind of divorced in my life. I think I met a lot of people on Wall Street that had a lot of wealth, but didn't have healthy relationships or a healthy body or a healthy mind or emotions or spiritual practice. And then I met a lot of people in the self-development world that had some of those tools, but they didn't have any wealth. And I've just been studying along the way how those things had been separated. But ultimately, to me, what I found out is that true abundance is really bringing both together. How to combine wealth and well-being. How to have wealth, but to use it in a way that supports reciprocity and supports the world in a positive way. And that without each other, you really only have one half of the coin.
Yeah. This reminds me of there's a book, I think it's called Make Money Do Good or something along those lines, where there's a thought of like, if I'm doing good, I shouldn't be making money because I'm giving to the world. But in that book, it talks about like, in order to make a bigger impact, you do need that money and it's important. So yeah, how are you helping people, or how did you yourself too start marrying all those parts together?
Yeah. I think what I found before I answer that question is just that
Mhm.
along the line of time, if we look back at some of the greatest religious movements or spiritual movements of all time, they've all been based in wealth. I read some research that said that Jesus was given the equivalent in today's value of $4 million worth of gifts at birth.
Mhm.
Frankincense, myrrh, and gold was visited by 300 kings and this and that. And I don't know the specifics on these stories, but there was definitely a lot of financial support. Moses was taken in by the Pharaoh of Egypt and grew up in the palace. Buddha was a prince. Arjuna was a prince. Muhammad married a very wealthy businesswoman. So I think if we look back at history, there have been these great, Indian Maharajas, these great kings who have done a lot with their wealth. And then in the same way, there have been a lot of great kings and queens that have really distorted the use of their wealth. But with some point in time, we started this kind of disease, I think, which is that having money means that you're evil. And money in itself is not good or bad. It's a tool, and how we express it is up to us. It's a big responsibility. How we use it to control or colonize others, or how we use it to support and make others' lives better, is up to us. In the same way, that's what AI is to me. You can use AI to write a beautiful poem and instruct it with things that you want to inform it and have it support, or you can use it to make atomic bombs and things like that. And so it's really up to us how we use these things. And that's really what it comes down to, is the individual, and knowing what you want, knowing what you stand for, knowing what's in your heart and what your values are, and using these tools to support yourself, your family, and the world in a positive way. So, along my journey, I started bringing all of these things into my Wall Street life. And for 10 years, I found that I was able to balance both of those things, create myself, create my business, and produce in a sustainable way that made me more successful. But ultimately, I realized that there was more that I wanted to do in my life, and I didn't know what it was. And I left the Wall Street world, And I said, I don't want to be that guy anymore. He's crazy. All he cares about is money. All he cares about is being on the computer all day and closing deals and being aggressive. And I really just went full on into this whole personal development, self-help coaching mode, only to realize that, in order for us to really be the best version of ourselves, we have to access all parts of ourselves. And that trader part was just as big a part of me as is this healer coach person. And so when I realized that my gift to the world, what I could really offer and how I could make the biggest impact was marrying the two back together in myself and in my work. And that's why I created the Abundance Archetype, my course, which essentially is teaching people how to have wealth and well-being and how to work in both of those fields in reciprocity.
Yeah, it's funny when you started talking, the first thing that came to my mind was the adage that, oh, money is the root of all evil, and that's what we're taught from. I mean, I know personally, I was taught from a young age. So how did you go about or helping people unlearn that that thing that we learned from it at a young age?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have this scarcity mindset where we come from either religious upbringing or cultural upbringing or familial upbringing that puts us in this concept of scarcity where, we don't feel like we deserve to have enough money or that money is evil and this and that. But, for me, it really took me to look at the etymology of these words to understand what they meant. Money is essentially currency, and currency is current. It's really the flow of energy and information. And so ultimately, our time is money, our energy is money, our resources are money, our attention is money. How we empower other people is a form of money. How we coach people and support people is a form of money. And money in and of itself has a mental, emotional construct. If we had $10 million and we lost 9, we'd feel poor even though we had $1 million. But if we had nothing and someone handed us $1 million, we'd feel like, Elon Musk or something like that, right? So there's all of this baggage, and it really comes down to looking at what your money story is. And one of the interesting ways to do it is to look at what's your earliest childhood memory of money. So think back when you were a kid, what's the first thing you remember that had to do with money? And when you look at that moment as a dream, and you look at the different symbols and the different players and the different actors, it interestingly can show you what your core wounding is around money, but in the same way, it can empower you to show you what your core powers are to generate more wealth for yourself in a positive way. And even more, the word money is rooted in the Sanskrit word manas. And the manas, we say we're human, but we really are humana. We cut it to human because of probably a patriarchal influence at some point. But really, we're humana. We're people of the earth. And what separates us from animals is our manas, which is our ability to think, feel, will, and have memory. And ultimately, the manas are supposed to be used to really know who we truly are. Use our thinking, feeling, willing, and memory to basically turn it back around and look inside of ourselves to really know who we are, where we come from, why we're here, what our purpose is, and how do we make a big impact. So for me, part of this whole scarcity model is that we're looking for this source of abundance on the exterior. But the whole point of being human and the whole point of having this manas is to turn it around and to recognize that that feeling of abundance comes from the inside out. And the interesting thing about it is that when we touch that place, when we know who we really are, when we can fully individuate and recognize that there's no other person in the history of this planet that ever had our fingerprints, that ever will have our unique makeup, our skills, our gifts, our talents, our dreams. Never is there another person who has our unique purpose here on this planet. And when we come from that place, we become indispensable to the workforce because we have something that nobody else has. And that ultimately leads to abundance.
Yeah, I like the going back to the manas part too, and like where we come from, what what we've forgotten about ourselves, and how that can lead us to remembering. Because it reminds me of, like, part of what we like to say is there's no one coming to save you. So in order to take your first steps in your pirate rebellion, you got to look within and take those steps and look at your own rules and figure out how to break them. So yeah, I like how that ties in with that idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So we talk a lot about social rebellion
Mhm.
on this podcast. What is your social rebellion that you're creating with the work that you're doing?
You know, what I think is interesting is in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says the government reflects the people. I think it's often really easy to point a finger at one person in the world and say, oh, Bill Gates is the problem, or the World Economic Forum is the problem, or any such organization is the problem. Donald Trump is the problem, or Biden's the problem, or whatever. But in the same way, we have to understand that they're really ultimately a reflection of us. That these things in the world that we've created are things that are really projections of where we're at collectively. And so for me, the greatest way that you can have a social rebellion is to begin by looking at that in yourself. Where's the Trump in you? Where's the Putin in you? Where have you colonized yourself or colonized another? Where do you speak your mind in a positive way, and where do you speak your mind in a way that hurts other people? So ultimately, I'm encouraging everybody to recognize that if you really want to make change in the world, you have to look at these things and these people out there that you're against and find them inside yourself and work on yourself and ultimately lead from that place. And so that's really what I've been encouraging people to do. And it really brings me up, you have this good trouble poster behind you, Kristen. And, we had talked about that. And so, you'd asked me this concept of good trouble. And so for me, like, that's what that is, that these things that are outside of us that are troubling are a good opportunity for us to look at where we have that inside of ourselves. If somebody's challenging us in a relationship, where are we like them? And in the same way, where do we actually need some of their energy in a more positive way in our life? And so, yeah, that's kind of my concept of social rebellion, is that, I see a lot of people out there in the activist world that aren't willing to look at the other side of the coin. And in the same way, they're not really willing to look at how they are like the other inside of themselves. We say a lot of these things are conspiracy theories, but the word conspiracy etymologically comes from conspirare, and the root word is spirare, or spirit, and spirit is to breathe. And so what it's really encouraging us to do is to breathe together, to sit with the other side, see that even in the sides that we hate, the sides that we have that we think are troubling, there may lie at least some part of the truth in there, and that we could only overcome the challenges that we have when we all get together, listen to each other, and find the best way forward. And so that's kind of my concept of social rebellion, and that's sort of my concept of how that ties into good trouble, which I know is a big part of both of your work.
Yeah, the conspiracy part too. There's so much here. Like, I like how you're breaking down the words, to like how with that we sit and we breathe together. And there's just looking at the words and what they actually mean. Take it, like, it's like flipping it around, because usually you think of a conspiracy theorist as somebody that's against something else, and yeah, to be able to look at and think of it as this is people coming together and talking and breathing together.
To me, it's the opportunity. Like, what we call conspiracies in a lot of ways are things that we don't want to, we want to put on as like, that's not us, or that's wrong. And, of course, I look around the world and I think that there's a lot of conspiracies too, that I'm like, oh, this is crazy what's going on in a variety of fields. But when I really understood that word, it's like it's really giving even me an opportunity to say, like, maybe there's even some part of the truth. And anytime that we're polarizing anything, we're not really getting down to the root of that. The beauty comes from the transcendent function of two people or two opposing ideas coming together and finding a way forward together and not polarizing any issue.
I think the hard part that I'm having, like reconciling that, is when the thing that I'm against, right, or the group that I'm against is like upholding things like white supremacy or misogyny or, anti-LGBTQ plus like rhetoric. How can, when I see the thing I'm fighting against to be upholding like the subjugation of certain individuals, how can I move forward with them when that's completely and utterly against all of my like morals? How do you marry those two things together?
Yeah. I mean, have you ever subjugated yourself?
Of course.
Yeah. So it's really just that. It's just, like having empathy for, okay, these people that are like really hatred full, or, probably had a very painful childhood, probably have been a product of a system that hasn't really supported them or educated them, and they too are suffering. And in some ways, while we don't agree with them, we can maybe empathize with them because we too have done that in some ways, maybe not as in a hateful way, but maybe we've done that to ourselves. Maybe we even have an inner critic who beats up on our own self in the same way they're beating up on other people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can just start even like 1% or like a homeopathic drop to sit in the other shoes and see how even in some small way, we can find that inner self. We can begin to find a way forward. Mm-hmm. Because interestingly, in some ways, when we're so polarized against them, we're like holding up the other end of the rope, and we're like almost entrenching them into their polarity, but almost like in a shamanic way. If we can change even the slightest bit, we can maybe have them come off their end and move slightly towards the middle and inch towards us as well.
It's interesting because I live in Portland, Oregon, where we've had like polar opposites of Proud Boys and then Antifa, however they pronounce it, but like where they're polar opposites of each other, fighting against each other. And like as you're talking about this too, just thinking about how they do seem to be so opposite each other that they are almost like opposite mirrors to each other, but fighting against each other. Yeah. So
let's say I hated Trump, for example. I don't really care too much about these individuals in politics. I think that there's often bigger issues at play. But let's just say that I'm really polarized and I hate Trump. I have to look at, where am I a little bit Trump-like? Where am I a little bit patriarchal? Where am I a little bit egotistical? Where do I say things without caring about other people's feelings or call somebody a name? Where do I trump my own heart? Where do I trump my own dreams? Where do I trump the needs of my family for my own needs, etc.? You can go on forever, but there's something in you that you can find. And in the same way, the hard thing is, where do I need a little bit more of that Trump energy in my life? Not in the way that he might be using it, but where do I need to speak my truth unapologetically and really be myself, possibly? Or whatever it is for you. But there's always a way. There's always a way to find a power in the one that disturbs us and use it more constructively. And there's always a way to find somebody who we really are against inside of ourselves, begin to understand them a little bit more. And these are the things that are really essential if we want to move forward, because if we don't do this, we're just locked in this polarity with this other side, and we're not going to actually get to a place where we can move forward and make change. And so that's my social rebellion, is being willing each day to do these things, whether or not it's with my wife or with anything that comes up in my personal life, or even in the world with things that I'm really against. Like, gosh, I mean, I could go on forever with things that I'm against that I see out there, but you have to constantly be willing to look at, how am I a part of that? How am I in some small way co-creating this? And how am I like them? And how do I even need to maybe use one of their skills in a positive way? Maybe not in the way they're doing it, but in a positive way. And, I'm not saying this is an easy practice, but it seems to be the truth for me that the things that we're most against are in some ways part of us. And so I think it would be really beneficial for all of us to think about, we're out there trying to kill viruses without realizing that viruses make up more organisms in our own bodies than we have cells, by like 10 to 1. We're out there being mad at Putin for colonizing Ukraine without recognizing that the social media companies and all of the phone companies and all the data companies are colonizing us every single moment of every single day, and so forth. And so to me, it really starts from the inside out.
I'm curious. I'm thinking about like how the phone companies have colonized us and taking that step from within. Yeah, what would be a step there? Just in the recognition? Would it be a step in like taking time away from your phone? Yeah. What? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we have to really wake up to this stuff, and we have to, maybe turn our phone off, God forbid, right? or support search engines that don't track, or various things, But we have to really, the things that we're against, these things that are out there in the world without. I think it's almost in some ways like a smoke and mirrors to the things that are happening inside of our own self each and every day. And so it really starts to waking up in ourselves and recognize, I don't want to be colonized. I don't want to be in a surveillance state. I don't want my data to be tracked everywhere I go. And recognizing that, like, to the extent that that's happening to me, I'm actually finding out that I know more and more about less and less, because the algorithms are so intelligent that they keep showing me more information and confirming my already existing biases into the same sort of corner. And so I have to be willing to turn off my phone and recognize that on the computer, there's as much information positive for Antifa as there is for the good boys or whatever, so much for Republicans as there is Democrats. You could look up any single issue and find so much information on both sides of the coin. And ultimately, it comes in reestablishing a relationship with your own heart. The heart is a place of discernment, and that's something that AI doesn't have. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have a value system. It's human generated. And so ultimately, all of this leads back to the place of like getting in touch with who you really are, getting in touch with the wisdom of your body, getting in touch with the intelligence and the discernment of your own heart, your own dreams, and then coming from that place in the world.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about the abundance archetype, and like who do you work with, and what kind of coaching or are you doing with people?
Yeah, thank you. Well, one of the cool things I think is to explore this word abundance. As you can tell, I like to look into these words, and I didn't always do this. I've had a great teacher, a yogic guru named Jeffrey Armstrong, who's a word magician. And then I have my dear friend Laurel Erica, who introduced us. Thank you, Laurel. Shout out. And she too has opened my eyes to the hidden messages in words. And so I've really taken it upon myself to look up almost every single word that I come across. That, what does spiritual mean? We use these words in our life: spiritual, abundance, surrender, God. But we don't really have a definition that I think we just like, spiritual means like, this or that, right? Like, we don't really think about what these words mean. And like, I think we have this idea of abundance, but it's not something that's really well defined. And so a big part of creating this course for me was really answering that question. And so the first part of it, I already kind of touched on, which was the marrying of the wealth and the well-being. But when I looked at the etymology, it took me to a quite deeper place, because the word abundance comes from a root word unda, U-N-D-A. And unda that leads to Varuna, which is a Hindu or a Vedic deva or devi, which we would call it as a god, but god is not the right word in their culture. But a deva is essentially like the personified laws of nature, the intelligence behind water. You might say the water spirit. Water is so powerful. I mean, it's one of, we all need water. And, many people are out there that say, oh, water is just water. But, if anyone studied Masaru Emoto or structured water, or has tasted even artesian spring water versus, New York City tap water or something like that, or like a Dasani bottle of water in a plastic bottle stored on the back of a truck, for 3 months, it's obvious the difference, that water is not just water, and water has tons of energy and information. We could talk about that for hours, but the point is that we are water beings. We're 99% by molecular count water. Our earth is something like 70% plus water. And so this whole concept of abundance is that it lies underneath us. It's under us. It's in ourselves. It's in the water. And that water leads to affluence and fluency and fluidity. And so really where I'm leading this to is that this concept of abundance is basically this. It's that no matter what happens in your life, you can't control if things are going to be good. You can't control sometimes if things are going to be bad. Pleasure and pain come together. Happiness and suffering come together. There's these ebbs and flows of life that we ultimately realize that we can't control the ultimate outcome of every situation. We've all experienced that. But being able to stay in our center and to stay balanced despite what's happening in our life, that to me is the pinnacle of abundance. And part of that is being able to flow in these polarities, accessing all parts of ourselves, being able to see the beauty in the disturbing thing, being able to pick up the power of another person that's challenging us, or that we're in a problem with, right? And literally like seeing and asking questions and seeing every facet of a situation. There's a great story that I like from Viktor Frankl in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about being in a Holocaust concentration camp and seeing Jews being walked into the gas chamber, singing songs of life, like translated yes to life was their chants as they're dancing and singing their way into their death. And then that's a really almost, I don't know, it gives me the chills almost every time I think about that. It's wild to think about that, but to me, what they're showing there is the pinnacle of abundance, which is you can take my money away, you can take my car away, you could even take my life away. But what you can't take away is my attitude towards it. You can't take away my mood, and you can't take away my spirit. There's a part of me that is eternal that you can't touch. And when you touch that place, I think you're in a state of full abundance, knowing who you really are and what you stand for, and not allowing anything in your life to change that, despite the circumstances. And so in my course, I mean, that's sort of like the meta motivation. And essentially what I did is I took my 20-year Wall Street experience and I studied what I did that made me successful. I worked with world famous investor Paul Tudor Jones for 20 years, and I studied him for literally 20 years and studied everything that he did and what made him successful and what was his process. And I developed a system for looking at how to develop your own process in whatever field you're in, whether or not it's podcasting or being a parent or an investor or an athlete. Here are the things you need to do to be successful. And the interesting thing that I came across around that is that same philosophy around investing, to me, applies to managing yourself when you make yourself your most important investment. We are our best asset. We are our best technology. We are our most important investment. And how we manage our own lives is the same way that a professional investor would try to manage any kind of asset in the business world. And then I wanted to say, okay, now that I have this process, how do I really master this? Like, I had these moments on Wall Street when I was just like in the flow, right? We're in the zone. We're just like locked in and things are just naturally happening. But these things are like spontaneous moments that come. And when I started studying flow research, I recognized that when you're in the flow or in the zone or in the pocket, as people say, or this like runner's high, when you're just like cruising, that you actually perform better and feel better at the same time. That your future prediction goes up, your creativity goes up, your efficiency goes up, and even your immune system's supported because you're just like really immersed in something you love to do. And so I went back and I studied this, and it's kind of a long story, but I ultimately developed 8 steps to mastery, which are the 8 essential things that I felt like were required to develop these flow states systematically in your life. And a lot of them is really starting to work with nature, recognizing that most of us, man or woman, mostly in our business world or in the world, professional worlds, usually are using more of a left brain, not a gender masculine, but more of a masculine or a yang approach to figuring things out. We crunch a lot of numbers. We look at linear results. We study, we read, we try to figure things out. But for me, what I really am encouraging my students to learn is how to use the whole feminine side, how to listen, how to be receptive, how to use altered states of consciousness to create creativity and to inspire your businesses in different ways of doing it. So one of the fascinating things that I'll just say is when I was creating this course, I sat there for months trying to figure this thing out, working hard, draft after draft. How many steps, how many weeks, how am I going to put this all together? I have 20 years of Wall Street experience. I have 20 years of experience working with coaches and masters and gurus all around the world. How am I going to put this all together? And it was only in these moments, this one particular moment where I was down on a trip in Texas visiting my brother and some friends, and I was lying under a pecan tree just taking a nap, which I almost never do. And in that moment of just complete relaxation, the whole kind of map came into me. And in that moment, I recognized that the problem that I had, and this is really what I designed my course on, was that I was thinking I was in charge of the course, that I was the creator. But I recognized in that moment that the course was alive, that the course had intelligence. And I started recognizing that I was in relationship with her, that she had her own dreams, her own limits and boundaries and high dreams and low dreams and moods and desires. And she had her whole own energy and intelligence. And in that moment, I started to really spend some time listening to her and allow her to guide me almost like a lover or a dance partner. And in that way, the course started to effortlessly come together. And then from there, I started designing a lot of the different methods in my course to help people in some small way each day systematically try to connect into the intelligence of their body, the intelligence of their dreams, the intelligence of their businesses, the markets that they work in, or even the intelligence behind their courses or whatever their podcasts, for example. The Pirate Living podcast, you could really realize might even have an intelligence of its own. And that you're really there not as chairman of the board, but maybe as co-CEOs that are helping facilitate this larger intelligence and this larger mission. And, spending time listening to that each day about what guests to have on, where to market or how to grow or whatever it may be, instead of, doing it with our more typical left brain approaches to that.
And it sounds like too with the program, like we like to talk about pirate code, which is figuring out your values and also like what you want in life and getting a structure around, and maybe not even structure, but just like getting things figured out of like, this is how I want to move through life. And this code helps me to recognize like the steps to take in order to create what I want. So it sounds like in a way too, you're helping people create their code with the abundance archetype.
I really think that you summed it up pretty well there. That if I could say anything about it, it's just that. It's recognizing that, the importance of the individual, the importance that we're all unique. And so like one of the first steps is really defining what's your competitive edge in business. What makes your podcast great? What separates it from the other 3 million podcasts out there? And really defining that in simple terms and really like putting that up on your wall. That's your mission statement or your vision statement. And that's the most important thing. But in the same way, how do we do that for our lives? What diet works best for us? Not something we read in a diet book that worked for somebody else, maybe in a different country, but what works best for us? What kind of movement practices do we need? How much sleep do we need? What brings us joy and play? What kind of relationship do we want? How do we learn best? How much sun do we need? And the list goes on. But ultimately, that these things come down to that nobody can actually tell us these things for ourselves. We can read a lot of information. We can have a lot of people guide us. We can listen to what works for others. But ultimately, yeah, it's really about developing that code for yourself in all areas of life and work. I find that there's no more important thing to do than to really know yourself.
Where can our listeners go to find out more about you and about Abundance Archetype?
Yeah, well, the easiest place is my website, jasonpickard.org. And the cool thing about that is you can book a 30-minute call with me for free, and we can just chat about your life and what your goals are, and to see if you're a good fit to learn more about my course and to take the next steps. So I've been meeting a lot of really cool people that are interested in seeking abundance, and have had a lot of opportunity to spend some time with people from all walks of life, all different countries, and coming in from all different sources of podcasts and things like that. And so, yeah, jasonpickard.org, you can find out more about the course. You can book a discovery call with me. I'm also doing my best to put out meaningful content on Instagram, which is new to me. But when I started this business in February, I decided that was an important way to express myself. So I've been having fun with that. And so you can go to Jason Pickard Official and check me out there. And those are really the two main ways to find out more. And I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to hear from you and see what's going on in your life and if I could support you in any way.
Do you also have a podcast that you do, or is it just on Instagram that you're putting your message on?
Yeah, I do not currently have a podcast. Okay. It's something I've been thinking about. Mm-hmm. It's just, I realize how much time and energy needs to go into it to make it really work. Mm-hmm. And I've been so focused on getting this course out. I have, one of the things that I've been offering my students, which is really cool, is that in addition to the course, which is really powerful, I've been offering a 12-month mentorship program where essentially I've now created a tribe or a community of people that are in the course, and we meet 2 times a week. We do live group coaching. I bring in special guests like Laurel and various other friends of mine in sort of diverse fields, from business all the way to Akashic records and everything in between. And I bring people into the course, into these live group calls. And so, yeah, so I've been really focused on that, and it's been really meaningful, but it's been quite time consuming, as you can imagine. I also have 3 kids and a 4th one on the way. And so it's full pirate mode over here and all levels. Living with a lot of pirates, yeah.
I love that I'm hearing dogs in the background, and for once it's not mine. Like, those are none of my dogs barking.
The interesting thing about that is, and sorry by the way to everybody, but
we're used to it here.
Yeah.
One of
the way I live my life of abundance is by many dogs. So
okay, yeah, I see the wolf in your background. At least one picture of a dog right there. Oh, there's many.
Hard to see. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I would just say is that in the work that I do, most of the time we can look at that as a disturbance, right? If one of my kids runs into my room when I'm working with a client, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so unprofessional. Get out, you got to get out of here. Don't you know? And daddy's working, da, 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 whatever. But the reality is if we look at as everything, like we looked at that as good trouble, what is that message? Like that dog barked at that one particular moment when I was talking about this mentorship. And so if I was going to think about that, like maybe I need to bark a little bit louder. Maybe I need to really express how excited I am to be able to work with these people and change their lives, and to just how honored and grateful I am to have that opportunity. If a kid runs into your room, maybe it's an opportunity that you need to be more playful with your client, or your client needs to be more playful. How can you be a little bit more curious, right? All of these things, even in our everyday life, are essentially good trouble. That dog could be like a complete disturbance where I'm like, oh my God, it just ruined the podcast. But if you learn how to do almost like a keto with it or flow with it, how is that almost like a dream-like message here to support me in this moment? Not as a disturbance, but as something that's awakening me to something, or something that I actually need to call in myself. Maybe I need to bring in a little bit more of my own primal energy, or bark a little bit, right? And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of offer that, because I think it's an important way to look at what we spoke about before, about these kind of larger figures, like these people on the world stage. But even in these little things in life, they're all there to really guide us into more awareness about how we can live in wholeness in the moment, in my opinion, at least.
I'm going to take Bentley's snoring as a sign that I need to get more rest. He's my old guy that usually is snoring underneath my desk.
And as somebody that works with kids, I'm all for anybody like taking those moments of childhood interruption, or to take as a reminder for bringing more play and joy or wonder and curiosity into your life, because I have so much more fun when I'm working with kids, because I get to bring that wonder back. So
yeah,
take those moments.
And wonder and curiosity, the childlike mind, those are some of the most important skills we can have in life and in business. The people that are real innovators and the real creatives that have changed the world all have had a childlike curiosity, a willingness to look at the world differently, a sense of wonder, a sense of awe. This often gets beaten out of us as we become into an adult, but the reality is that those kinds of things are how we can access our greatest impact in even in our business world, is playing, is being creative, and just having a sense of curiosity and wonder, and just exploring, like, maybe there's something in the other side that I'm not seeing. Maybe there's a different facet of this investment idea that I'm not aware of. How can I explore more? How can I wake up each day and ask deep questions about, what is this really? If I was to enter into this business today, if I was to enter into this relationship today for the first time, would I still do it? Just being curious about these kinds of questions has really served me extremely well. And I know that of many successful people in the world that I've studied, they've all had that same sort of beginner's mind, or Zen-like mind, or childlike mind, or whatever you want to call that. But really a sense of wonder. And, to be honest, I don't know how you look out at our world, despite all of the insanity, and still not have a sense of wonder. I mean, being outside and looking up at the stars, watching the sun come up each day, just watching the beauty that is surrounding us. I mean, we're living in the greatest art museum there is. And we have usually more of a sense of wonder when we walk into, a constructed museum, or we play a video game or watch a movie. But we're living in the greatest art gallery that ever created. And just waking up each day and having a sense of awe and reverence for that, I think, is really helpful.
My husband likes to wonder about clouds, and I like to laugh at him about it, because he's like, really, clouds? How are they up there? So you reminded me of his wonder when he's like, clouds. I mean, what, how are they up there?
Well, I think a lot of us find that when we were kids, we would ask those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I was a kid, I'd ask a lot of questions about death to myself. I didn't have anybody in my life that can really answer that. I didn't know. I didn't understand death, and it would keep me up at night. But ultimately, I realized that like there was some impulse that was much stronger that, ultimately I went away from. But now in my work, I recognize like there was something there. There was some part of me that was like wanting to ask really big, deep existential questions about who we really are, and not really identifying with this physical body as much as the spiritual being that lives inside of this body. And so I think if we go back and look at those questions we asked as a child and we start to incorporate those into our life, they can be really helpful for us to find a deeper level of fulfillment and sense of purpose now.
Yeah. And how would you recommend our listeners start their own pirate journey? Like what step or what action or question even would you recommend that they take to start?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of ways that I could go with that. But what's coming up for me in the moment, and I'll just go with it, is what I call in my course a process of divesting. I think often we think that there's more that we need. We need to study with a particular person, or we need to read a new book, or there's some time in the future when we can do this, when everything's right. But for me, it's more of a process of what do we need to let go of? What belief systems are no longer serving us? What do we need to die to a little bit today? It reminds me of Michelangelo. When Michelangelo would look at a boulder, he wouldn't carve, in his words, the statue of David, let's say, into the stone, but he would remove the excess. He would already see in the stone the end product and just cut away what was no longer needed. And I think, and this is sort of a very high level, it's not maybe necessarily a practical skill, but I'm encouraging people to realize that it's not like you need anything more. It's almost about what do you need to remove to get down to the core of who you really are, to really know yourself, and what things have been piled on top of you in your education or by your parents or various belief systems that you no longer need at this point in your life.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you. It was really fun, and I really appreciate it.